Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the A Few Good Men on the Big Ten podcast. I'm Bruce Hooley alongside Andy Anders. We are hoping that we have Big Ten football, particularly Ohio State football, this week with the Buckeyes taking off their game at Illinois on Saturday, which highly convenienced Joel Klatt. Joel Klatt will have you know. I heard an interview with Joel today on the Clay Travis Outkick the Coverage show, and Clay asked him, how did you find out the game was canceled? And I got a 6-minute tirade from Joel Klatt about how much time he invests in getting ready to do a game, as if he was the only one inconvenienced by Ohio State not playing Illinois. But it was an interesting cancellation. It has ramifications on the Buckeyes' Big Ten championship game hopes, and we have a Penn State-Michigan game to talk about, and sorted other things throughout the conference. Strange year. It keeps getting stranger.
All the time. This cancellation really, of course, put the damper on Ohio State's not only Big Ten championship hopes, as you mentioned, but on the college football playoff. They can't afford to miss another game.
Mm-hmm.
Ran the math on this. Some of you know that if the league average for Big Ten games drops below 6, then the 6-game minimum required to make the Big Ten title game changes to 2 games less than the league average. So if it were to drop below 6, that would be 4. Which Ohio State's already played 4 games. But it would require 9 more cancellations in these last 2 weeks, 9 more games to be canceled, and that's more than a majority of what's left for that to happen, for the league average to drop below 6. So it's either play these last 2 games for Ohio State or you're not going to the Big Ten title, and we've yet to see a Big Ten team have to cancel a game and not turn around and have to cancel the next one too.
Yes. Both Maryland and Michigan State, right, have canceled and then had to cancel a second in a row.
Wisconsin.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
So we shall see whether Ohio State plays this week. We want to remind you, first of all, that if you want to send us a message, you can do it on Facebook. You can do it on Twitch. We appreciate you watching us on the Chris Landry Football Channel on Twitch. Hit the follow button. You'll get a notification every single time that we broadcast. It's a great way to keep track of Big Ten football and football across all the conferences, as LandryFootball.com is your home for all of college football, fantasy football, NFL football, recruiting. All the things you care about in football are covered in depth at LandryFootball.com. So hit that follow button, follow us on Twitch, and we appreciate you doing that very, very much. Okay, the Ohio State-Illinois cancellation, as mentioned, was late. Ohio State, as early as Saturday morning, was still planning to fly. Well, I guess Friday. Joel Klatt was told, the one thing I did learn from his interview, he had a conversation that Ohio State was originally planning to play the game at 3:30. They were going to move it back because of testing. That was a new wrinkle I hadn't heard before. And then Klatt got a call that it was canceled because Ohio State had an increasing number of positive tests, but not a number above the 5% automatic cancel rate. Is that how you understand it?
Apparently, that's how Gene Smith made it sound in his series of interviews this weekend. Gene Smith being Ohio State's athletic director. The only thing that confuses me, I guess, the original reports that it was a high single-digit number of players and staff that tested positive, including head coach Ryan Day, who tested positive heading into the Illinois game, and that's why Ohio State thought that they were going to have associate head coach, and defensive line coach Larry Johnson as the head coach for Saturday's game. What I think is interesting, though, is you have this report that there's a high single-digit number of players, and I thought all this time 5%. Well, if you consider about 110, 120 players on the roster, about 30 or 40 staffers with, when you talk about a head coach and his staff, strength and conditioning personnel, quality control personnel, I thought, about 150 people, 8 tests is 5%, which is the threshold.
The threshold, including everybody, though, if I'm correct on this, is 7.5. Players, it's 5%, right? Players only is 5, or total number of staff and players is 7.5. Am I correct?
I think you are right on that.
Okay.
But that's even then, that's only about 10 positive tests required then. So the fact that they had a high single-digit number. At least this is what was reported. They never confirmed the number of positive tests.
Nor the identities.
Outside Ryan Day, which I'm not sure was an intentional confirmation other than, well, yeah, it was. Because obviously people are going to know if Ryan Day isn't standing up.
Yeah, if he's not on the sideline, something's up.
And they probably could have figured out the players too. They were going to release a COVID list before the Illinois game.
Saturday morning.
2 hours before.
Normally it's Friday morning.
Yes.
Their unavailable list, their injury list.
Right. I don't think they're too happy with the media over there at the Woody. Regardless. So it was interesting that you have a high single-digit number of players and coaches test positive, and then an increasing number of tests, and yet they're still below the threshold somehow. I don't know if it was by just one or two players, maybe they could have cleared it. Regardless, Gene Smith said they could have played but chose not to because it wouldn't have been fair to Illinois, apparently.
Right.
Which I guess I can't really understand. If you could hold out the players that are positive and still go beat Illinois with, even if you could probably take the 10 best players off this Ohio State team, they still go beat Illinois. I don't know why you wouldn't, other than, because if you have the tests in hand, you know who's positive, who's negative, right?
Sure.
You think you could just go play that game, get the win, and move that one step closer to ensuring you can qualify for the Big Ten title game in the college football playoff. But I don't know. Why do you think, assuming what Gene Smith said is true and they actually did clear the threshold, why would you cancel that game, Bruce?
It's pure speculation, but this is a scenario that I think makes sense. You have a number of tests on Thursday and a number of tests on Friday, and the Friday number is higher. And you know that some of your negative tests on Friday are guys who were around those who tested positive either that day or the day before. And you're waiting for them to test positive. You're thinking they're going to test positive. You don't want to get over to Illinois. And, well, I guess they would have tested in Columbus in the morning and then flown. So they wouldn't have tested, prior to kickoff once they got to Illinois. But I think that they can say they did it for Illinois' benefit. I think they might have done it for Illinois' benefit, but first and foremost for Ohio State's benefit. You see, it could be good for Ohio State and it could be good for Illinois. They don't want to expose Illinois to a potential outbreak. I'm not here to question their motives. I think, too, with you, if I can play the game, if I got enough players and I think I can win the game, I'm playing the game. That's what I would do. But they are closer to the situation, and I just say that's my preference. I'm not sitting here like ripping them or questioning them for why they did what they did. But you articulated it very well, Andy. It does put them in a precarious situation where if they have one more game canceled, they fall short of the standard to play in the Big Ten title game. Now, that doesn't mean that they're ineligible for the playoff. They will have a game the weekend of the conference championship game, because if they don't go as the East rep, they'll have what the Big Ten's calling championship weekend. They match the 2 from the West, the 2 from the East, the 3, the 3, the 4, the 4. What if the Michigan game gets canceled? Would they play the Ohio State-Michigan game on championship weekend?
They'd have to reschedule it. I don't think the Big Ten is capable of working out that level of logistics there. Kind of going off what you said there, I do think I guess I can understand it, too, from the perspective of you have a contact trace, right? I don't know how long it takes after you actually catch COVID for you to test positive for it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's not like you come in contact with the person you get it from and then 5 minutes later you could test
Nope.
positive.
Nope.
So from that perspective, I understand why you would, if you have an increasing number of cases, why you would decide against playing the game. But yeah, the precarious situation, as you said, for Ohio State, what do you do, I guess, if you're Ohio State, you're tiptoeing around this threshold? Where is the line that you have to cross to cancel Michigan State this week? Because canceling Illinois last week is one thing. You still have the chance, I guess, to play these last 2 games to get to the Big Ten title game. But is it going to require them getting to the threshold now for them to cancel Michigan State, or do you think they would still cancel it if the cases are increasing, but they could still play potentially?
Well, they say they're hoping to play, and they've closed their facility, so there's no practice. Nothing's going on from an organized team activity standpoint. I don't know if the players are getting together on their own, allowed to get together on their own. They keep it locked up pretty tight over there. But they can, as I understand it, return to practice as early Thursday, right?
Yes.
Thursday would be the earliest. So if they got a practice Thursday, a walkthrough Friday, they could play Saturday at noon. Is Ryan Day going to be cleared?
I don't think so.
None of the players who've tested positive, as I understand it, they are out for the rest of the regular season, 21 days.
21 days. That takes you through the Michigan game.
Yeah. So their facility's closed right now as we talk after 10 a.m. in the East on Monday, November the 30th. And it's a fluid situation. It'll be developing later on in the week. Okay. We did have football in the Big Ten. The game that was supposed to be the headline game of the year, but vanished into the ether and rotten starts by Penn State 0-5 and Michigan 2-3 before Saturday, ended up being a pretty dominant Penn State win, 27-17, even though James Franklin had his requisite clock mismanagement thing at the end of the half. Cost his team a down to score another touchdown. Not that they needed it because they dominated Michigan. Michigan's 2-4. And we've beaten this horse adequately, but I just don't see. Michigan plays Maryland this week. Maryland at the Big House. Maryland can score. That I know. I expect Maryland to win.
I would pick them. I would pick them at this point. I think I'd really pick most teams in the Big Ten either over either Penn State or Michigan. They're just, what are you playing for at this point? You have other programs that are, when you're on the rise as a program, it's easy to play well, right? It's easy to be motivated, even if you're not contending for a Big Ten title. If you're in the shoes of a Maryland or a Rutgers, it's easy to play hard right now, even if you're hovering around that 500 mark or below it, because you're trying to build something, right? Michigan and Penn State this year are on the opposite side of that spectrum. Michigan's been on the fall now. Really, Harbaugh's best team is still 2016.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't gotten back to that point.
Nope.
Not that that team really accomplished anything significant in the end. They up until Ohio State weekend, they were good. And I guess they had a decent team in 2018 before Ryan Day
took their heart away.
Took their heart away with some great offensive coordination. But so
look at Maryland's motivation this week.
Yes,
look at Maryland's motivation. I mean, you look at these two teams, who's more motivated to play? Maryland's won at Penn State. So Maryland has a chance to paint 2020 as the year they won at Penn State and at Michigan. Now, Penn State and Michigan aren't very good, but that's still something I know Maryland would look at and go, hey, we're building.
Yes, exactly. You get those recruiting races going on the East Coast. Everything starts to build for those programs. And now you have two other programs on the flip side of this that could be looking for new head coaches after this season. But I don't know. Maybe James Franklin earned a contract extension with that
maybe
clutch win against now 2-4 Michigan. Where do you think
they're 2-4 and they're a Rutgers missed field goal away from 1-5?
Yes, exactly. It's not a pretty sight there at Michigan. We all think and believe that Jim Harbaugh should be on his way out. And we've beaten that horse, as you said, with a club, with a bat, with every tool in our shed,
yes,
so to speak. But what do you think about James Franklin now? Because we've talked in the past about looking maybe that it's time to move on from him. They haven't. They've been the main challenger to Ohio State in the East, more so than Jim Harbaugh has, since both Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin have been in the conference. But do you think now, given again the off the field stuff with Micah Parsons, whether or not, whatever the extent of truth to that rumor there is, not rumor, report, I should say. Do you think with that and with the on-field struggles and with the recruiting struggles we've noted in the past with Franklin, do you think he's on his way out of Penn State?
The thing with James Franklin is, on record and everything and circumstances of 2020, you'd say, no, it's a write-off year. He lost his two backs. He lost Micah Parsons, quit on him. Yes, I said it. He quit on him. Any guy who doesn't play this year because of getting ready for the draft, quit on his team. He just did. I get it, but you quit. So you can write that off and say he got dealt a bad hand. All the other stuff under the bridge, coupled with the off-field reports, the ugly stuff that Micah Parsons assaulted a player and Franklin kept the player from going to the cops, doesn't help. I'm not sure all of it yet rises to the level where you force him out. But I think you could have conversations where, look, if you leave, I get it. And if he'd leave, I'd get it. Because he just hasn't quite gotten over that hump. They've been good. He's done a nice job. He didn't inherit an enviable situation. I don't think he's terrible across the board. Like, I look at Harbaugh and always will be perplexed how he didn't recruit, didn't develop, didn't coach well. I'll never get it because he's capable of doing all that. He just didn't do it there. Franklin's been pretty good at Penn State, but do I think somebody could come in and do better? I do. I think Luke Fickell would be tremendous at Penn State.
Absolutely.
I think he'd connect with the Pennsylvania coaches, his brand of football, his toughness. I think he'd connect on the East Coast. I think he'd do very well for himself in New Jersey and places where Penn State has been done very well before. I think Luke would come into Ohio and be a thorn for Ohio State eventually. I think Luke and whoever is next at Michigan, and I think Matt Campbell makes the most sense at Michigan, could turn the Big Ten East into what the SEC West used to be. Do I think in 4 years with Matt Campbell at Michigan and Luke Fickell at Penn State and Ryan Day at Ohio State that the Big Ten East is the best division in football? In 4 years, is Nick Saban still at Alabama? I doubt it. So, yes, I think those 3 guys would make the Big Ten East an absolute juggernaut. So that's where I stand on James Franklin. He's good, but you can do better.
I agree with that. I don't think he's done the combination of the off-field stuff. I honestly think he should look for a new job. I just think he's kind of worn out his welcome there. I'm not sure firing is the right path for them. Because he has done well, but as you said, they can do better. They can, if you could land a Luke Fickell, I'd say absolutely, maybe have a mutual parting of ways with James Franklin. And Thornton, Ohio State side is an understatement when it comes to recruiting Ohio. Luke Fickell has incredible relationships with Ohio high school football coaches. A lot of people forget he was the bell cow Ohio guy when he was at Ohio State. He's always been an incredible Ohio recruiter. And we all know that winning in the Big Ten often comes from Ohio as a recruiting base, but Pennsylvania produces plenty of top talent, some that Ohio State stole in recent history. I mean, Julian Fleming, number 1 receiver in last year's class, just came to Ohio State from Pennsylvania. So I think Luke Fickell at Pennsylvania, Penn State, talking Ivy League now, Pennsylvania. Matt Campbell at Michigan. I don't know. I'm interested to see how Matt Campbell handles himself at more of a top flight program. Obviously, he gets Iowa State up to play every week, and I like what I see out of this program over there. Very good offensive mind. Do I think the Big Ten East could become the new SEC West? I would say it's in the realm of possibility. I wouldn't necessarily predict it. I think there's a lot of steps that need to be taken to get there. And I mean, someone has to eventually consistently upend Ohio State. I mean, there might be a year where Ohio State slips up, but is Ohio State ever going to be consistently challenged for the Big Ten East crown, year in, year out? That could be difficult, even if you get the right coaches in place. Their footprint is so strong now. Their brand is so strong now, and so much of recruiting is about that these days. So I guess kind of moving off that, though, one interesting result we had from this weekend, to say the least, Michigan State upsetting Northwestern. Northwestern came out number 8 in the first playoff committee rankings. Northwestern had the inside track to win the Big Ten West. Might still
does
if they went out. But what do you make of that game, Bruce? I mean, Michigan State, not exactly the cream of the crop in the conference.
No, their offense is terrible, and they hit 2 big passes. Rocky Lombardi hit 2 big passes, and Northwestern doesn't score enough to give up cheap touchdowns. Their defense is a bend but don't break, rarely blitz, make you go 12 plays, and when you give up big touchdowns through the air to Rocky Lombardi in Michigan State, well, you've invited the result you got. And Peyton Ramsey got a little banged up in that game, and Michigan State seems to be a team that if you pay no attention to them, they can get you if you're within their hemisphere. Ohio State's not in their hemisphere, so Ohio State is not going to lose to Michigan State if they play this week. But it's nice to win for Mel Tucker. He can point to a first year where he beat Michigan on the road and he beat Northwestern. And, that's more than I thought he would do because they didn't have a whole lot coming back at the end of the D'Antonio era.
No, I thought they were going to be the worst team in the conference entering this season, even worse than Rutgers. They haven't. I mean, it's not like they're world beaters, but they put together a decent season. Yeah. Mel Tucker might have some momentum going forward. We've seen what success at Michigan State could look like with the D'Antonio era. D'Antonio is Rockets NBA guy. But yeah, I think you're building for the future there a little bit at Michigan State, but it's the first year for Mel Tucker. The jury is definitely still out for him. I don't know what he's going to be there. if he's going to be an incredibly successful Michigan State head coach and have some of the success that the previous coach did, or if he's going to struggle the same way. And you have to start contending with Michigan again for Michigan recruits.
You would think, yeah.
But I mean, again, they weren't high class recruiters. They weren't looked at as the best recruiting team in the Big Ten by any means when D'Antonio was there. But they had he was great at developing guys. He got the most out of the recruits. He got the 3-star guys. He got some 4 stars, but not a whole. He didn't contend in Ohio big time with Ohio State. Michigan still got most of the top guys in Michigan. So I'll be really interested to see. It's just one of the main storylines to watch over the next few years is, can Mel Tucker return Michigan State to some semblance of success, or is it going to be what Michigan State was for decades before the last regime was in place?
The A Few Good Men on the Big Ten podcast is sponsored by our friends at American Betting Experts, one of the largest licensed sports and casino vendors in the U.S. We've teamed together with them to provide a special gaming offer to all the Landry Football followers and podcast listeners. Just go to our website, LandryFootball.com. Click on the ad located in the upper right-hand side of the page. Pick among the gaming sites that are legal in your area. Maybe it's BetMGM, DraftKings, FanDuel, PointsBet, some of your options. Sign up, instantly receive an account deposit match or a risk-free bet from $100 to $1,000. It's that easy. Go to LandryFootball.com, click on the ad located in the upper right-hand side of the page. Get in on the action with a special offer from American Betting Experts. All right, our headline game this week would be, in my opinion, Indiana at Wisconsin. Who does Ohio State want to win that game? Indiana at Wisconsin.
I think Indiana. I mean, the whole holdout hope that Wisconsin's the number 2 team and they meet in the Big Ten champions weekend. If Ohio State loses, or I mean, not loses.
Yeah, if Ohio State wouldn't have enough games to play for the title, they would need a resume-building win on Champions Weekend. So my reason for asking the question, I didn't really explain it very well, is if Wisconsin has a win over Indiana, does that give Ohio State, and Ohio State-Wisconsin is just a possible game. It's not a definite scheduled game. Does that give Ohio State a more impressive win opponent than, say, if they would get to the title game of Northwestern?
Well, I think it's just that. It's hypothetical, and so you kind of go with the bird in the hand situation here. Indiana's back in the top 10 in the AP poll. I think you've already beaten Indiana, so Indiana winning is going to boost your resume 100% guaranteed. Yep. So there's no guarantee you're going to play Wisconsin. There's no guarantee really for anything.
Yeah.
So I would say I would want Indiana to win that game if I'm an Ohio State supporter. Now, what I will say is that you have if Ohio State, even if they play Wisconsin Champions Weekend, I still think it's an outside shot. The committee would put them in the playoff as a non-conference champion that only played 6 games. There's so many other, just looking at the way they rank teams and how they've weighed certain things so far. I mean, Ohio State being 4. Think about if Clemson avenges their loss in the ACC title game, I would think the committee might still rank Notre Dame ahead of Ohio State in that scenario. Obviously, the SEC champ's getting in. Then you have a couple different one-loss SEC teams. It helps the Texas A&M struggled against LSU this weekend for Ohio State from that scenario. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the committee put 2 SEC and 2 ACC in instead of, or an SEC, 2 ACC, and like a Cincinnati over Ohio State. If Ohio State's only played 6 games and only 2 of them were against decent teams, like Indiana and Wisconsin would be the 2 decent teams in that case. So I don't think it's a done, sealed, delivered deal if Ohio State ends up playing Wisconsin and beating Wisconsin on Champions Weekend for a college football playoff bid.
Ohio State's punishment for playing 6 games may be the 4 seed in the playoff. They have to play Bama, and then we all assume Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame in the rematch. DJ Ungalele played really well for Clemson in that game against Notre Dame. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence would have made the difference. It's hard to say that the number 1 pick in the NFL draft wouldn't have made a difference. I get it. I assume Clemson will win that game. If they do, I think Clemson and Notre Dame are both in. I do. Now, the wild card becomes, what do you do if Bama goes undefeated and loses to Florida in the SEC title game? It's pretty hard not to put Florida in. Got to put them in. They're the SEC champ. It's pretty hard not to put Bama in.
Yeah.
Because they're Bama, And so does a one-loss Bama get in ahead of a 6-0 Ohio State? That would be a worst-case scenario for Ohio State, that Clemson would beat Notre Dame and that Florida would beat Alabama. That'd be the worst-case scenario. I don't think Bama's going to lose. I do think Clemson will beat Notre Dame. So if it's Bama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, the committee has an issue with, they don't like rematches. So if you put Ohio State 4 and Bama 1, you're going to play Clemson and Notre Dame for the third time in the semifinals? Or are you going to put Ohio State Clemson in and make Bama Notre Dame's a monster TV matchup?
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe you drop Notre Dame to 4 because they lost most recently. You make Bama play Notre Dame and you make Clemson play Ohio State.
Yeah, so
that's the most likely scenario.
I don't know. Just something in my gut tells me that they're not going to look at a non-conference champ that played 6 games, and they're going to weigh other teams. Just the way they've propped up the SEC, the other 2 SEC teams, the 2 one-loss SEC teams thus far. Really, I don't know. It scares me as someone who is looking at a potential Ohio State playoff berth, but a Wisconsin win would be a big resume booster. I just think it's not a certain thing that they're in if they only play 6 games and they don't win the Big Ten.
Yeah, you could be right. Remember, if you're watching us on Twitch, thank you very much. The Chris Landry Football Channel on Twitch is their place to go to watch lots of live shows. Our men from the Big 12, in defense of the Big 12, come up at the top of the hour. Go to chrislandryfootball.com to find out all the shows that will be on Twitch, and hit that follow button to get a notification when we broadcast, every single time we do broadcast. Okay, let's take a good hard look at the Big Ten Conference as we do every week and cite the things that we think people need to pay attention to.
You can't handle the truth.
What is your you can't handle the truth moment in the league this weekend?
Well, not in the league nationally. I think the kind of going off the point I just made, I think we need to change the playoff structure this season. Special circumstances require special solutions. I think you either, when you have a team that's only playing 6 games in terms of Ohio State, it is hard to field them out. I don't envy the committee's position in trying to weigh teams that are only playing 6, 7, 8 games versus teams that are playing 11, 12. And I think that changes have to be either. You have 2 options here, because I think you can't even weigh Cincinnati properly in all of this either. Cincinnati, if they went out to me, deserves a shot to play in playoff and show they can do it with the big boys. If Ohio State does play Michigan State, does play Illinois, if Notre Dame is avenged, you're not going to put Cincinnati in ahead of SEC champ Alabama, Big Ten champ Ohio State, or both Clemson and Notre Dame. They still deserve a shot to me, and this is it's just such a special circumstantial year. So one of 2 things I think need to happen for the playoff committee. Either A, push it all back. Would be a logistical nightmare. It would be hard. If you push it back, allow teams to schedule some more games or push dates out for conference style games maybe. The other factor we haven't even talked about in all this is the Pac-12. They don't have what's Oregon's record?
Well, they lost 1. They lost to Oregon State in the don't call it the Civil War.
Yes. So you have some Pac-12. Like, what if there's a 1-loss Pac-12 champion they only have the chance to play 7 games, but in a normal year, if Pac-12 champ went 12-1, you have to weigh them.
Yeah. So
I think that you either A, move everything back to allow for more games, which I don't think they can do at this point. Maybe they could.
Their sponsors would hate them if they moved off January the 1st for the semifinals. Their sponsors would absolutely hate them,
and it would be a logistical nightmare trying to reschedule all those bowl games, trying to reschedule the selection dates, trying to just working everything out with the conferences and scheduling. So I think you have to go with option B, which is just expand it to 8 for 1 year. For 1 year, expand it to 8 teams. You can play the first round as home games. You can choose 4 random bowls. I don't think it really matters. But there are other years I hear people argue, look, there are hardly ever more than 4 teams that deserve a shot at the title, and that's what been the main argument against playoff expansion in the past. And I understand that. I've always been an advocate for 8 because you have 5 power conferences. How can you have 5 power conferences and only 4 playoff slots? But this is the year to move it, just for a 1-year exemption, move it to 8 this year. Because if Ohio State, even if they win the Big Ten title, having only played 7 games, you're now stacking them up against the teams that have played 12. You could let them in with a lower seed if they miss this Michigan State game and then, don't play for a Big Ten title. They beat Wisconsin in that extra game, or if it's someone else besides Wisconsin, they have to play in Iowa per se in that Champions Weekend. Cincinnati would get their shot in the 8-team structure. I have no doubt if they won out, they would get their shot. Probably BYU too, who a lot of people are calling for with their undefeated record. So I think this is the year to have a one-time expansion to 8 teams. You don't have to make it a permanent thing. Obviously, the TV contracts kind of prevent that at this point. But this is a special year that requires a special solution, and it's hard when there's so many moving parts across a sport that has such a lack of unification in leadership that this virus is exposed. I think it's time to allow some leeway and some time to figure it out, and an extra round of playoff games gives that wiggle room.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think it would. You're basically talking about leadership and being bold, and I'm not sure that there's a central enough power in college football for that to happen. Okay, so that's Andy's You Can't Handle the Truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Mine is also in that same vein, leadership. We are so concerned. The Big Ten has been so concerned this year with the optics of everything, playing in the first place. They've been proven to be wrong on that. When you see that the SEC and the Big 12 are going to play a much more complete season, and they're playing it with fans in the stands. And so my beef here is, I get the positive tests throughout the Midwest. Let people make their own choice. Let parents make their own choice on going to games. It is ridiculous to see cavernous, empty Big Ten football stadiums where parents can't even go and watch their sons play football. That is so dumb. It is so dumb. You're outside. Every parent, being one myself, I can tell you, would take the chance to go and watch my child play a sport. I've sat all fall watching my daughter play soccer with a mask on, which I don't think is necessary outside, but I'm willing to do it because that's the rule, and I want her to have a season. Big Ten parents deserve the opportunity to watch their sons play football and to see Michigan Stadium completely empty, to see Ohio Stadium completely empty. It's just so much the Big Ten wanting to virtue signal and be optically bulletproof with the people who fear COVID. You don't have to go just because you have the right to go. We seem to forget that. Like, if you allow people to go, it does not mean you force them to go. If they don't want to go or they don't feel safe to go, let them make their own choice not to go. And I would have fans in there, but I get why they don't want to. But to keep parents from watching their sons play is, I think, really short-sighted and done just for optic reasons. And that is not a good enough reason in my book. So that's my You Can't Handle the Truth.
Yes, I agree with that. I think parents should have the right to go watch their sons. We're not even talking about 20,000 fans, which you could implement. Other conferences have implemented with social distancing. You have over 100,000 seats in Ohio Stadium. You could fit 20,000 in and have everyone 6 feet apart, or at least parties 6 feet apart, have everyone wear masks, etc. But I understand maybe the Big Ten doesn't want that logistical, but parents not allowed in the stands is so wrong and ludicrous. And these players don't even get to see their families right now because they're avoiding COVID. So you don't get to see your family, and now they can't come watch you play. It's a double win.
Yeah, it's really dumb. All right, so here are the games this week in the Big Ten. We talked about Indiana at Wisconsin. Northwestern is at Minnesota. Minnesota canceled last week, so that one's up in the air. Ohio State at Michigan State, we talked about, is up in the air. Maryland at Michigan. And I can't even say that's upset alert for Michigan. I think that's a
either team could win alert.
Either team could win alert. Penn State at Rutgers. Don't sleep on Rutgers. I didn't think I'd ever say that, but Greg Schiano, that's a big one for him in recruiting the Eastern Seaboard. Watch out now. They almost got Michigan. Penn State's better than Michigan, but hey, Rutgers will have it ready to go. How many trick plays is Greg Schiano scripting for the old Penn State battle?
I'd say about 34.
So he coached at Penn State for a while. And Nebraska is at Purdue. So those are your games in the Big Ten. Andy and I will be back on Monday to preview all of them. A reminder, we're sponsored by America's betting experts. Go to LandryFootball.com. Click on that in the upper right-hand corner. Get your free match on your bet. And remember to watch us on Twitch and to follow us on Twitch. We appreciate all of you watching us, and we hope that you will be back again on Monday at 10 a.m. Our friends from the Big 12 in defense of the Big 12 are next at the top of the hour. Go to LandryFootball.com for all things football and enjoy your week.